Hi, and thank you for this opportunity to present on our project titled Caring for the Carer at Discharge, Implementing the CSNAT Approach. My name is Celia Marston. I'm Clinical Lead OT at Peter Mac and Project Lead for this project. Anthea Udovicich is going to be talking later on in this presentation. She's also the Project Officer and Senior OT at Peter Mac. So what do we know about carers? We know that addressing carers' needs of people with advanced cancer is actually not standard practice in the hospital environment at the moment. However, the Carer Support Needs Assessment Tool, or the CSNAT intervention, has been shown to be a promising model that could be used to support carers during discharge home for end-of-life care, particularly in recent UK studies. So we saw this as an opportunity to trial a 12-month multi-site project at Peter Mac and Royal Melbourne Hospital with the occupational therapists to evaluate the introduction of the CSNAT into OT practice in an acute oncology setting. So the aims of our project were to evaluate the feasibility of implementing the CSNAT into clinical practice. So how will it work and why will it work? To assist carers for advanced cancer patients with complex discharge planning needs. And this including evaluating the acceptance and the appropriateness and feasibility of the intervention to patients, carers and OTs and at service levels. It's also involved identifying factors that helped or hindered the implementation process and the associated outcomes. So within this 12-month project, we used a number of strategies. Some of the key highlights were using carer consumers and seeking their input across all the stages of the project, from the planning to during the implementation and to after the implementation. We elected and allocated important stakeholders to the project working groups and steering committees that we held on a regular basis. And we also allocated clinical champions to champion the CSNAT and support its uptake and change in practice along the way. A lot of communication and promotion was important across the different levels, not just from internal education to fellow clinicians, but broader communication across different service providers and community palliative care services. Probably the biggest thing when you're trying to change clinicians' practice and try something new like the CSNAT was the importance of educational strategies. And that ranged from ongoing reflective practice within the team, talking about how many CSNATs they may have done, to what were some of the barriers and issues they were having, to some other creative ways, developing things like clinician videos, consumer videos, and ultimately revising a pathway that works for the clinicians to be able to implement the CSNAT into their practice easily. And also case studies along the way were really useful too. Here's some examples of some of our strategies. This is Roz, our carer consumer, and she did a fantastic video discussing the benefits of the CSNAT that we promoted on the Peter Mac intranet site and also at Royal Melbourne on their workplace sites to other staff and disciplines. Here's our team from the OTs at Peter Mac, and we conducted a number of training sessions for them and planning sessions along the way. And on the right here, we've got the CSNAT flyer, another promotional opportunity to celebrate the CSNAT success and the amount of carers that are reaching across the period of time. So it's also important to think about what the CSNAT actually is. And for some of you that aren't aware, it's a well-established tool that's used in the UK for palliative care patients in the community and their carers. It's a 5-stage carer-led clinician-facilitated tool. So carer tells us what they need, and it's introduced to carers during admission in this situation in our project. And we followed that up with a phone call or a shared view when patients returned home. Within our project, it was led by the carer, but facilitated by the treating occupational therapists. Occupational therapists traditionally involved in discharge planning, particularly complex discharge planning for advanced cancer patients. So we thought this might fit quite well.
So now I'll just go over some of the results from the project. So
we had 106 carers eligible at Peter Mac and 8 at Royal Melbourne, and the majority of them, 65% at Peter Mac and 100% of Royal Melbourne, accepted the CSNAT as well, which is great. The majority of patients actually also did all stages of the CSNAT, and quite a few also received a follow-up phone call as well. Some of the reasons for incomplete CSNATs included the patient passed away, so it was difficult to reach the carer. Sometimes the carer was unable to be contacted as well, which prevented further follow-up with the carer. And in some cases, the carer actually said they're managing okay and they didn't have any additional needs. So, and in some cases, the carer decided that they wanted to not continue with the CSNAT any further. So I guess one of the other things is the variation in results. Peter Mac had significantly higher number of carers just because Peter Mac is a solely cancer-based hospital, whereas Royal Melbourne, the carers of patients with a cancer diagnosis is traditionally a lot less as well. But Royal Melbourne are actually looking at introducing it in their medical team as well. So I guess now another thing we looked at with the project was carers' main needs, and as you can see here, carers actually prioritise their practical needs a lot more. So these were things like knowing who to contact if any issues arose, managing symptoms, knowing what to expect in the future, and also equipment needs as well. So quite a focus on the practical needs from the carers' point of view. We also looked at what the carers thought themselves, with Celia also conducting some interviews with the carers. So some of the things they said was centralise everything, address the unknown. They really appreciate the CSNAT as their needs can change as well. One powerful quote from a carer was confronting but necessary. And no one has ever asked me that before as well. So it's showing that there was definitely an unmet need with carers and they're getting supported through the CSNAT as well. So you're following up something through to making sure everything's okay, and it's an opportunity to ask questions as well. So really highlights how much they valued the CSNAT in the transition from hospital to home with their loved one. We also looked at the clinicians' behavioural changes in terms of what they felt before the CSNAT was introduced to when it became part of their normal practice. So at the beginning of the project, some of the occupational therapists were worried that asking the carers about their need could open up a can of worms, and some of them were worried that time would be a bit of an issue. But as the project went through and as we looked at the strategies Celia spoke about and the use of the consumers and education strategies as well, the OTs found that actually it was more straightforward than expected. It helped with supporting the carer, and they also noticed that through doing the CSNAT, carers were very thankful and they appreciating us doing it. And then it became the language in our team, I've done 2 CSNATs today, it was more straightforward than usual. So significant change to accepting and embracing the CSNAT approach, which is great. So I guess some lessons that we learned when evaluating practice change is that we need to evaluate across all project stages. Reflective practice is important also. So why are you seeing, what are you seeing? And also changing things as it goes along based on the clinician's needs. So for example, some clinicians liked having the hands-on approach and a video of how to do the CSNAT as opposed to written information. Being flexible and adaptive, and we definitely found that consumers were a very powerful element through their stories and their videos as well. And we also found that having clinical champions in the team had a significantly powerful impact as well for the project. So I guess, yeah, what are our next steps? So we're looking at carers policy across Peter Mac and Royal Melbourne, looking at analysing the care and clinician interviews and focus groups, and also looking at an ongoing sustainability plan. So we've also developed an online module for future project leads who wish to implement the CSNAT in their service, which is great. And we're also looking at some dissemination of findings at conferences and forums as well. So thank you for your time.